with people. Oh, hello. Is that me? When you're trying to have quality conversations with people, I'd rather get to talking about Jesus than getting caught up on a debate about evolution versus creation. Now, I'm perfectly happy for people to disagree with me. There's lots of Christians that disagree with me, and I'm okay with that. It's not me that's necessarily right. So I'm pretty cool with that. All I'm saying, from my experience, I have got caught up in debating evolution and creation in the past, and it's got me nowhere. And let's be really honest, I'm sure you're big enough and grown up enough as a Christian to know that there are lots of Christians believe that God used the evolutionary process to bring about the world. Now, some of my more reformed theological friends are shocked by that statement. Some of my slightly less reformed friends are shocked that people even believe in a literal 6-day creation. We've got the whole gambit in the Christian world. So, and this has been debated for years by Bible-believing, God-loving scholars. So, and I'm not one of them. So if they've managed to debate it for years, I'm sure that, my answer isn't the right one. So, but irrespective of that, for me, I've just experienced, I want to talk about the gospel. So I often say to people, look, I don't want to have a debate how we got here. I've got all on working out what I do now. I am here, to be honest with you. So let's not get caught up on that. So I just want to say that because my purpose with my response to my friend is not to debate that. So how do you think we got here? So my friend in this occasion said to me, well, Big Bang. I went, oh, right, okay. Said to him, was it loud? He said, what do you mean, was it loud? I said, the Big Bang. Was it loud? So just out of interest, was it really bright? Like, when it happened, did it make you jump? And he's looking at me as I'm from a different planet, which I probably am, to be fair. He said to me, Matt, why are you asking me those stupid questions? I said, they're not stupid questions. I said, you said to me, the reason you don't believe in God is because you can only believe in things that you've seen or that you've had first-hand experience of. So I assumed that if you believed in the Big Bang, because, as you said, you only believe in things that you've seen, then I just assumed you saw it. Now, I haven't given a debate here. I haven't given an answer as why I believe in a God can't see, and these are 10, proofs, like undeniable proofs for believing in a God you can't see. What I've done is I've just pushed his question, his statement, to the logical conclusion. The logical conclusion that he brought out, his starting point is you can only believe in things. He can only believe in things that he can see. Does that make sense? So this is where it's showing the working out, showing that you've thought this through a little bit more. And actually, anybody who's a decent person will acknowledge that there's a flaw. There's a weakness in what they've said. And often people don't want to back down from their opinion always, but what they have said, oh, that's a fair point. And it just shifts it a little bit, doesn't it? Apologetics and answering people's questions, in my humble opinion, is not the stuff that's going to lead somebody to Christ that moment. It's not, in my experience. Now, you've got certain apologists like Amy Orr Ewing, who's a phenomenal apologist, and she sees people become Christians through her apologetics. But that's because she's also a very gifted evangelist. And her vehicle for her evangelistic ministry is apologetics. Does that make sense? So, of course, the Lord is going to use her to bring people through to Christ. My experience is that with apologetics, it's best seated. I can speak English, honestly. So we go with seated, since that's the actual word. It's best seated in the sort of healthy, maybe, i.e. getting people to become open-minded, or little yes. So you'll find a difference. The healthy maybe tends to be a slightly more aggressive questioning, and you answer the questions and they become a little bit more open-minded. The little yes, when people are investigating, so they're really genuinely seeking and searching, and they tend to be more inquisitive in their tones. Generally, there are some exceptions to that, but that's my experience. And I mentioned answering the question because it might be the one obstacle. So I delivered a course called Reason to Believe. It's a course that I put together. And the idea is that I'm proposing that there is good reason to believe, but I understand that for some people, they feel there's good reason not to believe. So let's reason to believe. So that's the aim of the course. And it covers a lot of the obvious ones, really, like, can you believe the Bible? You know, how can you believe in a God you can't see? We look at evidence and science and how we interpret evidence. Then we go into the suffering question. And then we go into, why can't you just do what feels right? And then what makes you think Christianity's right? And at the end of the course, we give people an opportunity to, like I did this morning, either to become Christians or to make a decision to find out more, or the decision to become open-minded. And this lady, the end of, is it reasonable to believe that Christianity is right? Which is where we look at the person of Jesus. And I basically propose that Christianity is not right because it's Christianity. It's Jesus who is right. And Christianity is the only religion, putting it into that category for the sake of the unbeliever, because they see it as a religion. Christianity is the only religion that really understands what Jesus spoke about and who he was, and listens to his teaching and seeks to put it into practice. So it's this understanding that Jesus is right, and we seek to live by that authenticates Christianity. So if you want to decide whether Christianity is right, you have to decide whether Jesus is right. So we look at his birth, life, death, and resurrection. Does that make sense? And then at the end of that, I invite people to essentially acknowledge that Jesus was right. And so we'd had the evening, and I was sat down chatting to a lady who'd come to the course. And she said to me, Mark, I found this course really, really helpful. It's been absolutely brilliant. She said, I've definitely moved along that journey. She said, I want to let you know, I'm not far off becoming a Christian. And I know that I'm going to have to do that at some point. She said, but I'm just really struggling. She said, it just seems so unfair that it's only Christianity. And what about Islam? And what about Sikhism? And what about these other genuine people in these faiths? So I said to her, yeah, I know, I understand that. I said, I certainly from a human perspective, did all the usual stuff. But I said, maybe if I can just help you to understand something. So when Jesus said he was the way, first of all, he's the only religious founder that's ever claimed to be the way to God. No other religious founders ever claimed to be that. No other religion, even Christianity, doesn't claim to get you to God. So no religion's ever claimed to get you to God, and no other religious founder has ever claimed to get you to God or to be the way to get you to God. Only Jesus has. So first of all, Christianity isn't the same as all the other religions. They don't all claim it. So I said that's a factually incorrect thing. But the other thing you need to understand is when Jesus said he was the way, it was actually an ancient Jewish phrase. If in Bible times you were going to the market but you didn't know where it was, and you asked somebody who was a Jew, could you tell me how to get to the market? They wouldn't give you a set of directions because they would know there was a risk that you would get it wrong. What they would do is they would say the phrase, I am the way. And as they said that phrase, they would grab a hold of you by the hand and they would take you to the market and wouldn't let go of your hand until they got you to the market. How beautiful is that? Isn't that amazing? And so I said to the lady, I said, when Jesus said he was the way, he wasn't saying, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of instructions and directions because he knows you're going to mess up and get lost along the way. When Jesus said, I am the way, he's literally saying, I'm going to grab a hold of your hand and I ain't letting go until I get you to be with the Father in heaven. And then I said to her, why could Jesus say that though? I mean, nobody else said that. Why? Because they knew they couldn't. So why did Jesus know he could say it? Well, when Jesus said that, he'd already come from the Father, from heaven to earth. So he's been there. He's been there. Imagine, I said, if I offered you a lift and I'd come from the place and I'm going back to the place that you wanted to go to, but somebody else offered you a lift who's never been there, didn't know where it was and wasn't planning on going there, whose car would you get in? I said, you get in mine, because I've come from there, I'm going back there, and I'm going to take you to be with me there. And in fact, Jesus actually said, I've come and I'm going back, and then I'm going to come back again. I'm going to take you to be with me. And when Jesus said this, all the people that were listening said, well, we don't know the way. And Jesus said, you do know the way. I am the way. So can you see it puts a different complexion, doesn't it? So when I explained that to the lady, tears streaming down her face, she said, wow, I've never heard it like that. And it somehow got away from the intellectual debate of the question and made it a bit more emotional. In my book, Big Yes, Look Yes, Healthy Maybe, I've got a number of little testimonies that appear between each chapter. They're almost like case studies for me to say to the church, look, let's go on a journey with people, because most people come to Christ by journey. Her story's in there. She contacted me about 18 months after that event. She'd relocated to another place and she'd gone along to a local church. She'd signed up and gone on to Alpha and became a Christian and was getting baptized. Amazing, isn't it? So this thing of, for her, did she concede intellectual defeat? No, not at all. She was so close. And this one difficulty was the one thing she couldn't get hold of. And by the grace of God and in God's mercy, I was able to help her in that situation. So that's why I really believe in taking time to try and answer these questions. It's not that I'm trying to convince, it's that I'm trying to remove hurdles for people to come to faith. So I can't believe in a God you can't see is one of them. This is a good one. The problem with you Christians, when somebody starts with a statement like that, you brace yourself, don't you? The problem with you Christians. I was at a sixth form school in a town called Malvern. I don't know if or Malvern, depending on how you pronounce it. It's actually where my office is. And I was invited to do I think it was an hour lesson, 20 minutes on why I intellectually believe in God. And then open it up for 40 minutes worth of questions, which I did. I delivered my session. And Malvern, and this school in particular called the Chase School in Malvern, it's got quite a sort of intellectual pedigree. A number of the students would go off to Cambridge and Oxford. Kinetic, which was the government research centre, was there. So that the town was quite intellectual as a town, a very scientific town. I delivered this lesson and I said, right, any questions? It came as no surprise to me that a young lad on the front row was the first to put his hand up to ask me questions. It came as no surprise because I could see that every single thing I said he didn't like. He absolutely didn't like. He was like, there was almost smoke coming out of his ears and his veins were kind of pulsating. He was almost there. So when I said, right, anybody got a question? His hand was the first to go up. And so I said, yeah, go for it. So he said to me, the problem with you Christians is you only believe what people tell you and what you read in a book. So I looked at him, I said, yeah, fair point. He went, oh, really? I went, well, yeah, you just said it. Well, yeah, I know, but I didn't expect you to respond like, well, I said, that's why I responded like that. So it's a fair point you make. I mean, obviously you and I know it's the inner witness of the Holy Spirit, but I didn't think he'd understand that. So I said, yep, no problem at all. He went, oh, okay. And it kind of like, it shocked him a little bit because he was expecting me to come out, like a heavyweight boxer, really. So I said, so do you have a problem with that? He went, yeah, I do. He said, you can't just believe what people tell you and what you read in the book. I said, okay. So you mind me asking you a question? He said, no, not at all, not at all. I said, tell me what you believe. So he told me what he believed. He was a something physicist or something. Okay, so I listened to that. So that's really, really interesting. Absolutely fascinating. And it was, genuinely. I said to him, where do you get that from? And he said to me, well, it's true, innit? So I said, well, that's not what I asked, is it? I said, where do you get that from? And he said, well, it's true, innit? I said, I'm going to ask you one more time. He says, you're not answering my question. If I did that to you, you'd be up in arms. I said, I'm going to ask you one more time where you got that from. So I said, where did you get that from? He didn't have chance to inhale, let alone exhale. And somebody who was clearly a committed Christian at the back of the class, she shouted out, and I knew this, he got it from a book. And I looked at him, I went, you didn't. And he went, I did. He was very, very honest. I said, could you ask me another question? He said, yeah. I said, how come it's okay for you to believe what you believe when you got it from a book and somebody told you, but it's not okay for me to believe what I believe because I got it from a book and because somebody told me. I said, what's fair about that? I said, your process is fine, but all of a sudden it's not fine for me. I said, there's no fairness in that at all. There's no equality at all in that. And he said to me, yeah, well, the Bible's a load of rubbish. I said, okay, it's not, and we'll have that debate in a moment or two, but would you concede that what the challenge you've levelled at me for how I've got to what I believe is unfair? And to be fair to the fella, he didn't try to shrink away. But I've not come out and tried to prove why the Bible's worth believing in, or the testimony of witnesses of how they're admissible in a court of law, even though that was all really valid stuff. I just simply looked at the question he'd asked me. And you find that with lots of questions, a lot of it is untested thinking. Now, of course, there are some people that can do that next level, so you will come up against them, and that's where you then tiptoe into getting lots of answers, and how you have these testimonies on your smartphone, and you learn things to help you give those answers. And we should always move towards the answers, but in the initial stages, we're just trying to push the question to its logical conclusion, because then when you do present your bits of answers, they've just got a better landing ground. The Bible is full of contradictions. Have you ever heard that one from somebody? So you find happens quite a lot from the Muslims. Actually are particularly hot on trying to say this, as are the Jehovah's Witnesses. There will be two particular tactics, for want of a better phrase, that they would use. And in those instances, I'll just give them a Bible and say, well, here's the Bible. Could you show me? It must be really easy to find one if it's full of them. When you read the Bible cover to cover, where did you find the contradictions? And of course, again, most people won't be able to show you. They've just heard it said and they pass it on. The tricky thing for us as Christians is we've also heard people say the Bible's not full of contradictions, and we've passed that on. And we're in the same shaky ground in one sense. So I've read the Bible cover to cover 3 times, and there are some tricky bits. And they're tricky bits for all sorts of reasons. They're tricky bits because what we have as the English translation is not the original translation. So we have some translation issues, which is why we go back to, or we study these people that can read Greek and these scholars who know these things. So, you'll know there's 4 Greek words for the word love, for example, whereas in English, we've got 1. So I love my wife like I love fish and chips. I mean, I don't, you'll understand. Let me just to bring a little bit of clarity. But we've got limited, haven't we? We've got limited words to articulate things. So there's always going to be tricky things. The Bible's written predominantly by Jews in predominantly a Jewish culture to predominantly a Jewish culture. And I'm from Bradford. So there's going to be a lot of things I don't understand. There's phrases that are phrases that were used in a context to mean one thing that don't mean the same. So when you look at them, they can produce errors. There's a great book called Answers to Tough Questions by Josh McDowell. There's a co-author whose name I can never remember. But that book will take you into looking at some of the Bible difficulties, because there are some. They're not contradictions, not when you dig around, but they look like they are. They look like difficulties. So I'll give you one, just to mess your head up a little bit, and then I'll give you the answer so you can sleep tonight. So Jesus said, just as Jonah was in the belly of the fish for 3 days and 3 nights, even so must the Son of Man be in the belly of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights. Okay, so let's look at that. Let's have a look at what took place, because Muslims pick up on this quite a lot to invalidate the resurrection. Why? So we believe, we're celebrating it this coming weekend, we believe Jesus was crucified on the Friday and was dead and was put into a tomb on Friday evening, okay? So that means one evening. He was in there all Saturday, so that means one day, 2 evenings. And then he was resurrected on the Sunday morning. That's 2 days, 2 evenings. Ooh, how does that work then? Because Jesus said 3 days and 3 nights. It's a contradiction. Or Jesus can't do sums. So what's the problem? Okay, so here's the problem. So you can sleep tonight, don't worry. The whole foundation of your faith has not been ruined. Okay, you'll be pleased to know. In Jewish language, to reference a day or part of a day, they would say a day and a night. And what they mean is this event took place at some point in one day. At some point in one day, at some point in one day. We translate it very literally to mean, so if we were going to use it the way our maths work, he would have to go in on a Thursday, wouldn't he, to make our maths work. But for the Jewish culture, they would say 3 days and 3 nights means that this event took place at some point over a 3-day period. So they're trying to define a day. So 1 day and a night would be part of a day. 1 day and a night is part of a day or whole of the day. 1 day and 1 night was part of a day or whole of the day. That's how they speak. That's the language they use. So when you understand that, then it all of a sudden makes sense. Can you see? So, but the Muslims, because they don't understand that, and because when they ask Christians that, they get a bit stumped. But that's why it's perfectly accurate what Jesus said, because he was just saying over 3 days. Can you see? So there are some difficulties, and from an integrities perspective, if we are going to say to people, the Bible isn't full of contradictions, you can say it by faith that it's not, and you can say it because I've said it if you trust me, but actually read it cover to cover and look at some of the Bible difficulties and get your head round them if you feel that that's something you want to do. I'm not saying you've got to. What I'm just saying is sometimes as Christians we can be a little bit guilty of passing on things that we have heard said that we don't know firsthand to be absolutely true. Just a few kind of final quick ones. You Christians are narrow-minded. Have you had that one or heard of that one? You Christians are so narrow-minded because you think you're right and everybody else is wrong. So I deal with that in a number of ways, a number of issues. First thing I do, pushing it to its logical conclusion. So I say the latest research showed that actually there were 2.2 billion people who claim to be Christians. Now, whether they all are or are not, it's not me to call, but that's the latest stats, 2.2 billion people that claim to be Christians. It's quite a lot of people, actually, isn't it? So I say to them, I said, you pose that question like it's only one or two people or a very small minority. And particularly in the UK, you're looking at the UK population, which is tiny, but 2.2 billion as a percentage of the world is actually a big percentage of the world that are claiming, or that you think are claiming to be right. I'll touch a little bit, when I get to the answer bit, I touch a little bit on actually it's Jesus. That's right, going back to what I said to you earlier. But just sticking with the question for now. So I said, but irrespective of that, and also, it's not possible for everybody to be right. It is possible for everybody to be wrong, but it's not possible for everybody to be right, because we're all completely different in what we believe. One of the reasons I wrote Faith Book back in the day is so I had an easy reference in my pocket of all the differences between all the religions. And I've actually, sometimes I even give that book away to my friends and say, well, it's funny, I've actually written a book, because actually we're basically not all the same. Read it all in there. But I will, just to push the question a bit more, I'll say, so could you just say, so just so I'm getting clear in my head, are you saying it's impossible for Christians to be right and everybody else be wrong? Are you saying that's impossible? Yeah. Well, that's a bit narrow-minded, isn't it? You see what I'm saying? So people are accusing us of being narrow-minded, but the very accusation they're making means that they're narrow-minded because it's not possible. And people don't think about that. Another time I was talking about Jesus taking the punishment for the wrong of the whole world. And this guy said to me, well, that's crazy. I don't believe that there's any such thing as right or wrong. Okay. So you don't think there's such a thing as right or wrong? Yeah. So I said, you know that statement you've just made? Yeah. Is it right or is it wrong? Oh. When it's right, well, hang on a sec, it can't be right because it's wrong. Oh, okay. So now your statement's wrong, which means there is such a thing as right or wrong then. And at first he was a little bit like, oh, what are you doing with this? And I said, no, you've just made this statement. You said there's no such thing as right or wrong. So you're making that statement as factually right. But you've just shown to me in making that statement as factually right that there is such a thing as right and wrong. And therefore your statement is now wrong. So I said, now you may choose to build your life on something that's philosophically crumbling, but I want to build my life on something that's a little bit more firm. You've made an absolute statement to say there's no absolutes. Well, that's just intellectual madness. So we're not even trying to prove whether there is such a thing as right or wrong as such. We're just trying to, in a sense, like shake the rug a little bit. Because when people realize that there's a little bit of naivety in what they're asking or posing, then it makes it much more, that makes them much more willing to consider an alternative opinion. Whereas if you're so convinced you're right, it makes it difficult to entertain an alternative opinion. So, last few things, and then we're going to give an opportunity for questions. I know this is quite a bit of thinking for a Sunday afternoon, but hopefully it's been something that's helped you a little bit. I think it's really important that we do answer the questions. I want to encourage you, as well as doing this stuff here that we've talked about here, just dealing with the objector and just kind of trying to push the question to its logical conclusion. I think it is right to give answers. So I want to encourage you to brush upon those. That's why my book, Good Answers, there to give you a starter for 10. There's some really good books out. Lee Strobel, The Case for Christ, has also done some on the case for miracles. Lee Strobel was the lead journalist for the New York Tribune from a legal background. He's written a brilliant book, so that would be a good one. Evidence That Demands a Verdict, which is a little bit more heavyweight, by Josh McDowell. Anything by Amy or Ewing. She's written a great book on suffering. That's a great book to get a hold of. Timothy Keller has written one. I've forgotten what it's called now, but if you look, it'll be obvious what it is. So there's a whole bunch of really, really good stuff out there. I would just encourage you just to start reading. Often we think you need to have a degree to answer these things. You don't, because a lot of it's actually common sense. So if you just read some of these stuff, and then get those links together, you're going to get yourself into a really good place. And what I would say is, if you can't answer the questions, don't be under pressure to do so. But I call it actively creating journey. Say to the person, look, could I just go away and do a bit of research or a bit of thinking? Or, oh, I've got somebody that I know who could answer this question. Or, oh, listen, I've listened to a talk on that. So rather than me trying to answer it, how about we sit down and watch it together over a cup of tea, because they can get it across better than I can. So those are good things to do, aren't they? Because we've got to take the pressure off that moment where we've got to get everything sorted there and then. So if you can't, don't feel under pressure, but get yourself to the place where you can answer questions. And if you can answer the questions, do. Do make sure that you take the time to answer them. And then just a few final things. Present your case with confidence and faith in God. If I can't answer the question, it doesn't mean they won't come to Christ. If I do answer the question, it doesn't mean they will come to Christ. But what it does mean is we've done our absolute best to try and get ourselves into a place where we can answer the questions that people ask us. And I think on the journey, that will stand you in good stead. And remember the old adage? Don't win the argument and lose the soul. We don't want to just win the intellectual game and then lose the person. And that's why I think just journeying with somebody and having a different approach is a bit better. So, we've got 15 minutes. Any questions, any comments, any observations, please feel free. If not,